So this year, I'm working on a variety of different substrates. So I've got one really large 30 by 40 inch work on canvas. And then I've got works on panel, works on wood, and then a lot of works on primed paper. And I think that the surfaces that I work on largely inform, my approach to laying down paint, whether I'm working with a brush or I'm working with a knife. And so when I work with a knife and I really layer up my paint, my pieces tend to be a little bit more textured. So the substrates, some will take, I think, the approach with a knife, sort of the scraping and the laying in of paint. If you've got like a panel or hardwood, that takes, you work with a knife a little bit better. Whereas when I work on canvas, so for my large piece, those transitions tend to be much softer and smoother, and the brush strokes I think tend to be a little bit more visible than, say, the really heavy textured application, just because I think that substrate doesn't take the hard scraping in the same capacity. And so largely the surfaces really dictate my approach to every painting. But in the show you will see some works that are really heavily textured and others that are not, and that's largely an impact of the tool that I'm using, but also the subject matter. So my large painting this year, which is of Black Rock Beach, it's really a very atmospheric painting. You can sort of see the bluffs that get sort of softer and lighter as they go back into the distance. For me, I felt like a brush was really appropriate in my approach to that painting, just because I wanted those soft and subtle transitions. Whereas when I'm dealing with a blue sky day and I'm trying to create a very high contrast painting, sometimes laying in a more textured approach really, I think, suits that subject matter a little bit better. So I almost do see a variety of different series within this greater body of work. So I've got on my little panels, the little 5x7 panels, the majority of them are really sort of skyscapes, or at least they start as skyscapes. And skies are something that have just always interested me, and subjects that I continue to return to. And then what I do is, once I've built in the sky, I lastly sort of bring in elements in the foreground that suggest Block Island to kind of tie those together. So that to me feels like one little body of work. And for me, it's really an opportunity to play a lot with color and texture and mood and atmosphere. And then the works on paper tend to feel a little bit, for me, more just representative of place. So this year, more than last year, I've really represented different beaches all around the island. And that wasn't really intentional. I think I just was going through, my photo library, and I was picking out pictures that I thought would be interesting. And then a lot of them ended up being beaches. But so I've got a lot of places that are really, I think, clearly represented on the works on paper. And then I've got a couple of works on panel too. One is a wavescape, because I can't get away from waves. I love them and I kind of keep going back to them. And then another sort of more atmospheric piece as well. So I think it's a fairly varied show. Works really vary in size from 30 by 40 down to 5x7. And, some are a little bit more abstract in quality and really heavily textured, and others I think are much more sort of representational. But I think that they all sort of speak to my aesthetic. It just, I feel like there are different little series or little bodies of work that I've sort of been nurturing for a number of years now and continue to sort of come back to and enjoy playing with. So I have a couple pieces where I sort of reference either human form or human element. I have a piece of the Old Harbor breakwater, and so there's a few little red dabs in there, both on the breakwater and then also the reflection below. And then I also did a piece of Mansion Beach, and there's little red umbrellas in the background too. So any opportunity I have to sort of bring in warmer tones into my work, I try to include those as best as I'm able. On a 3x7 mile island, I think that it can always be a little bit challenging to represent the same places over and over again. So, I try to make some modifications to my pieces, represent them at different times of day. Settlers Rock was a new one for me. I think that that's actually really underrepresented as far as the Block Island painters are concerned. And I realized in painting it, the reason is because there's a lot of concrete in the foreground. But, I think that it's sort of a fun way to take, working with rocks, which is something that I always do when I'm painting the beach, and sort of put it somewhere else and make it really prominent in the composition. And they're an opportunity to play around with color and contrast too, and place little dabs of color in unexpected places as well, so that the composition sort of hums when, the two colors that are maybe a little bit less predictable sort of sit next to one another. So even though those pieces feel really representational, there are little surprises within the surface too. And I think in this world, where we have just had such an awful and stressful year, we need as much beauty as we can possibly have. And so, I remind myself of that sometimes when maybe I don't feel so inspired. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. But, we need to just keep producing and churning out work that is positive for our world.